Alright. So, starting in... Let's scroll this up. 3, 2, 1... Alright, so, been a couple days since I did 2015, but we're going to start taking a look at RPG Limit Break 2016. So, RPG Limit Break 2016 was, of course, the second event. Wasn't even a given that there was going to be a follow-up. I mean, I think they announced it at the end of 2015 that they were planning on it, but, I mean, you do have to realize that a lot of early RPG Limit Break stuff was very touch and go. They had a long-term plan, but they weren't necessarily sure how much of the long-term plan was going to come to fruition. So they announced this. The original post was in November of 2015. Let's see if they have a timeline for the game submissions in this thing. They do not. You can see right here they still had pretty much the exact same staff. If you go down this, I don't think there's a single name that's changed from RPG Limit Break 2015. One thing that was new, we had a new venue. We were no longer at Essentia's house. They used instead the University Guest House at University of Utah. This was the first year it was there. They did end up doing this for, let's see, 2015 or 2016, 2017, and I want to say 2018 as well. Although we definitely were starting to we were pretty much outgrew it by the time that we got to that point. But this year in particular, we were in the University Guest House, and I believe we were in the basement, basically. Like, we weren't even... Like, I distinctly remember... Like, you went underground, and we had, like, 3 conference rooms. We had, like, a food room, we had a... casual / practice / whatever video game room, and then we had the stream room. And the stream room was pretty small, actually. Let me go ahead and pull up a run from the event just to give some context on what it looked like. That is modern. Right, I can actually close that. So let's go ahead and open this up. So you can see right there. Really, it was like. This isn't even a classroom size, right? We have a couch and then like 4 rows of chairs. Maybe you had seating capacity for about 25, 30 people in the stream room. Kind of sad looking at it. We did not do enough with those whiteboards, by the way. Totally should have done more with that. But that's fine. Hoping clicking back here isn't going to screw that up. It is. It's fine. I can scroll down a little bit to it. Know the approximate location. But yeah, so that was kind of the original stuff. Attendance costs, pretty much the exact same. $50 US for the full event. So none of that changed. The main thing was that you now had to get a hotel room. Preferably, I mean, if you don't know this and you're attending a GDQ or a Limit Break, if you can get something in their hotel block, it actually does help the event out a lot. Yeah, 2016 I think was a pretty pivotal year, because that was the year that really showed that, like, it could support itself beyond the extremely budget comparison that 2015 was. So, going into submissions, submissions were in December of 2015. There were about 5 pages of or a little over 5 pages of submissions. Actually, more like 4.1. Because this was the last one on page 5. Each page is about 20 posters, I want to say. Let me count this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, about 20 posters each. So if you go by Wexel's post at the time, we got 214 submissions, 100 more than last time, 832 hours. But I think they added an extra day, so even with the additional game length, like, this is nothing. You get this in probably 48 hours of modern game submissions. But yeah, it's kind of hilarious to think about just how much smaller the submissions are. Oh, and I haven't pointed it out. We are back on the good old Speed Demos archive because submissions were, of course, all the way through even 2019, I want to say, were handled on the SDA website, which is really funny because, as you can see, this website is down to 3 users currently. People just don't use SDA for anything anymore. But at the time, this was where you organized your community marathons, your GDQs. Literally everything ran through this, so not too surprising, but just kind of a relic of the past. Thankfully, like I said, all the data is still here and everything else. So, real quick, just to kind of go over some, the year 2015, in case people forgot. That was the year of stuff like we had Bloodborne, Fallout 4, Witcher 3 released, Batman Arkham Knight, and the problems that game had came out, Super Mario Maker, Splatoon was a big game that came out if you're a Nintendo fan like me, Ori and the Blind Forest, Mortal Kombat X. One of the biggest ones for an RPG marathon, you have Undertale, which was actually not done at Limit Break, despite having a few offers. At the Toby Fox's request, he wanted a 1-year moratorium on doing it at any large events. You have Activision trying to revive the corpse of Guitar Hero and failing miserably. Lots of really interesting things. Toys to Life started as a new trend, like really took off. I guess that makes sense because Smash came out the year before with Amiibo and stuff. So I guess it's actually almost the end of Toys to Life. Here's of the Storm was 2015. Wow, I did not realize that. Majora's Mask, that's just the official release. Alright, so, one last little bit. Game of the Year at Game Awards that year was Witcher 3. Witcher 3 was not offered at all, actually. Kind of funny, actually. Almost like there's no Undertale under the Game Awards stuff. At least on the Wikipedia list for it. Ori and the Blind Forest really is kind of the only game in here that I really remember that much. Fallout 4 did get some acclaim, and actually I think was even done in 2016, if I remember correctly, by Brsentia. So, and then if you want to go over like a little bit of early 2016, Dark Souls 3 did come out in early 2016. Again, these don't matter for the purposes of submissions. Ozzy and Chad will be excited to see Odin Sphere did come out in early 2016 as well. But in general, none of these really matter that much, but it's just still interesting to see kind of what the games landscape was like at the time of it. So, don't need that anymore. So, going into the actual games list itself, honestly, it was a weird one. We'll go ahead and do view runs. Opener was Super Mario and Luigi Superstar All Bosses by AltaBiscuit. Which is kind of a big deal. There's a big push to get this into GDQ even, to the point where the any % run was done. And they specifically took All Bosses, wanting to take a bit of a different approach to Mario and Luigi. And honestly, this is kind of the ideal opener anyway. They like taking a game that's well known, that doesn't have like great incentives. You can't really name Mario and Luigi, so going through here, you've got like GK was saying in chat, we have a lot of like surprisingly big names as far as people go. Again, AltaBiscuit at the time just got Twitch partnered. Karkarn, of course, was one of the biggest Final Fantasy runners at the time. You have, Geyer's a pretty big name right now. Blue Dolphin is huge in the Final Fantasy community. This was the first event that Bowie attended. I think I missed a pretty big one. Where is it? PJ ran Robotrek. This was his first time attending the Limit Break. Puri Puri actually is another kind of interesting name that ended up actually attending. Obza Jr. ran Bravely Default. It's another partner Twitch streamer, I believe. Biz was at the first Limit Break but didn't officially run anything. So this was his kind of run debut. J-Hobbs, this was his first event as well. It's another one that's actually kind of a big deal given the unintentional rivalry that kind of sparked between J-Hobbs and Vooligen. I'm trying to think if there's any other like super duper notable. Oh, OmniGamer with Suikoden. OmniGamer is a pretty big name just in speedrunning. I don't know if he's really like partnered or anything, but definitely a big name once you're kind of deeper into the community. So, one thing that is interesting about the list, if you look at it, it is very, very SNES heavy. All 3 SNES Final Fantasies were done, which I believe 5 hasn't even been done since. I could be wrong on that one. I don't think it's been in a main event Limit Break since it was done by Bic. I would assume towards the end, but it could be somewhere else. There it is. But 4 was thrown in very late. They intended to not take it originally, and then 6 Glitchless was done by Puexel and Essentia. The big long game of the event was Chrono Cross by Spike Vegeta and Evil Ash. It was also the first Square PlayStation era game that they did. Actually, great run. Also raised a ton of money, so not too surprising. And then the closer was Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix Level 1 Crit. This is, in my opinion, one of the best marathon runs of all time. And I think this run still absolutely holds up, even though obviously some new strats and things have changed within that community. But if you want an introduction to why Kingdom Hearts speedrunning is so cool, you really have to check out this run and like realize that like this run was done as the closer to what was at the time the largest speedrunning event focused on RPGs ever done, and then realize just how incredible this run is. Like, it really is something special. So, going from there, I'm going to go take a look at the YouTube numbers. I remember actually being a little bit surprised. So again, looking back at Limit Break 1, you know, the generic runs, the runs that didn't really take off over here got about 5,000 views. Runs with more followings got about 15 to 20,000, and then like the peak on here is like 75,000 to 100,000. So we go to the next event. There were a couple events on the channel. There was a Final Fantasy relay, which ended up being absolutely huge for the channel in terms of growth. One of the biggest reasons that Limit Break grew as much as it did, as far as viewership and donations, was almost certainly the Final Fantasy series relay here. I didn't mention it very much there, but this was, if I go on Social Blade, this right here, this spike was not this is not the first Limit Break. This is actually the first Final Fantasy marathon. You could see it was 8,000 followers, and Limit Break itself was only 9,000. So really, really big deal, like the original Final Fantasy marathon or relay. And actually, like, this was super close too. I think the only game that ended up actually causing a problem was 2 ended up having like an hour gap between the 2 runners, and ended up kind of making that a little bit worse than it actually looked. But this was actually like super duper close for, like, considering this was like a full week of Final Fantasy. So, you know, a couple other events. You had a Mario RPG marathon. There's the first Tales of marathon, which actually was a little mini spike of its own right here. I didn't realize this actually until I looked at it. The first Tales of marathon actually did quite well as far as followers on Twitch went, because I can't find any other events that happened that month. So those were kind of your 2 biggest events. Maybe the Mario RPG marathon was the same month. That would kind of explain that, but yeah. So going into the actual YouTube viewership for Limit Break, you have the numbers are a lot higher pretty much across the board. You see 25K for Draken. Draken's a kind of an infamous run from the event because this game is garbage. And this run ended up like killing multiple SNESes while it was there. I think they like ended up using 2 different SNESes and 2 cartridges to get this run to finish, or something crazy like that. Just absolutely cursed video game. Hilarious run, by the way. See, Final Fantasy V, the 75K views here actually makes sense because it's the only like real marathon run of Final Fantasy V. Yeah, 2 SNESes, 3 TVs. I think Dark ended up breaking that cartridge intentionally. But you see again, Disgaea 32K. This actually hasn't gone up all that much over time, but this was one of the big standouts view-wise for a long time. It's interesting to see that it's fallen off so hard. Stuff like Eternal Sonata really wasn't even close to it for a long, long time. The big run, again, I always, if I ever, like, people say, like, oh, you know, RPG speedrunning isn't that interesting, or, like, what do longer speedruns look like? I always refer them to this run. This 100% deserves every one of these 255,000 views. Shadow Hearts was in 2016, you are correct. Another one of the longest runs, 190,000 views for Chrono Cross. This one totally makes sense to me. It's probably the best commentated version of this game pretty much anywhere. You have Spike Vegeta on commentary and running it. You know, classic game that really is kind of underappreciated, and it has its faults, of course, but I think at the event and kind of where it is, it has kind of enough competition that it actually succeeded pretty well. So going through, Soul Blazer 18, Superstar Saga at 74. This was the opener for the event, so if this is at the beginning of a playlist, I'd expect this to be about 50k, but still quite good actually. Mario RPGs tend to actually not do that well viewership-wise. Although I'd say that they used to do pretty well on YouTube, because there's Paper Mario in a later event that actually I remember doing surprisingly well on YouTube later. Suikoden 2. This is actually another one of the standout runs of the event. 67,000. Just super beloved game. OmniGamer has worked on this for just freaking years, and this is kind of his final, his chance to finally show everything off. So, yeah, GK. I'm thinking current, like, a lot of Mario and Luigi stuff kind of has started to fall off if it's done in events, but this was still when it was a lot bigger. Oh, okay, so I don't know what GDQ numbers look like anymore, so it's been a while. Child of Light. This one, I'd expect the low views in part to be just kind of oversaturation. This game ended up in a lot of marathons at the time. Actually, another standout run, by the way. Essentia's kids co-op it with her, which makes it actually pretty special. Shoutouts to I was on Audio Tech for this run, which, whew. Let me tell you, having kids run around and finding the crowd mics and yelling into them "Hi Twitch chat" is that's an experience that you only really get once. So I literally, like, Villagen walked up to me before that run and said, "Here are the mute buttons for every mic. I want you to have your hand over them at all times, and if anything goes wrong, you mash that as quickly as you can." Because you can't really tell a 7-year-old, "Hey, don't do that." They don't really understand what a microphone is and how it works. Final Fantasy X. So the Final Fantasy name, that makes sense. Robotrek by PJ. This one, I imagine, is partly just the name brand behind PJ, although also I think Robotrek is like one of those weird hidden SNES games that, like, people will search out, like, just a weird video game. But I think this is mostly PJ. Yokai Watch 28. That's actually been kind of going up over time. Going further, actually no, Shadow Hearts was a different one, I think, but maybe I'm wrong. We'll get there. Kingdom Hearts by J Hobbs. Again, this was J Hobbs' debut. He did beginner here. Funnily enough, he was not the original runner for this. It was supposed to be Bloody Biscuits, but BB had exams and couldn't make it, so Hobbs filled in. Half Minute Hero by DoWolf. Parasite Eve by Turbodog. This was, I think, actually before Palmer just kind of destroyed this game, but Seiken Densetsu 3, I believe this is one of the... This should be like the only time this was done. And this was actually before it ever got released in English officially, so... pretty interesting run. Definitely a bit of a surprise take, but I mean, you look at the names behind it, it was a 3-person run with lots of big names kind of pushing that and making it happen. Final Fantasy GBA by Geyer. Again, Final Fantasy 1 tends to just overperform expectations, so I'm not surprised at the view count there at all. Phantasy Star 4 by Jisseed, only having 26k actually sounds a bit low. Serious Sam, the Random Encounter, the game that Alta still jokes that he got into Limit Break and GDQ and has no idea how. Quest for Glory 1 through 5. This one probably is a victim a little bit of very niche market on top of self-competition. There's been quite a few runs of this on the channel eventually, so. 13 by Lou Dolphin again. Final Fantasy just does very well on YouTube, in part because there's a lot of Final Fantasy. So if you don't know how the YouTube algorithm works, anything that takes off is going to feed into other similar games, and it's going to probably try to feed any Final Fantasy person other Final Fantasy. So that makes sense. Lou Dolphin is, of course, the biggest name in Final Fantasy 13 speedrunning as well. Shining Force 2, this run is actually really, really good. Shoutouts to Cruncha showing up and help commentate this almost out of nowhere. Yeah, 13 is a fantastic speedrun. So going further, we have another Earthbound run. I'm actually a little surprised to see Earthbound starting to actually creep up in viewers. 48. What was it at the first one? So I remember looking at the first one actually being shocked at how low it was. Yeah, 15K at the first event. Like, this was actually like the donation peak of the marathon and like one of the viewer peaks live. So it's interesting to see that actually grow over time. It does not happen very commonly, especially for a game that's been done. Earthbound was considered to be kind of the Super Metroid of Limit Break for a while, since it was the last game to not get into every event, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, they do not usually grow in viewership. If you do the same game multiple years, they usually does not appreciate in views. Usually the second one will be slightly depressed. Like, for example, Wild Arms is down pretty significantly here, despite the fact I think this is even Be Good, which is one of the funniest categories of all time, which is beat game using demo. Baldur's Gate, Final Fantasy IV. Yeah, see, like, again, the Final Fantasy IV is way down. Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals. That's Ancient Cave. Surprisingly not a race, actually. I guess I knew they did a race, but I guess that was at the second event they did Ancient Cave at. Hey, there's a nerd. Again, like, at least on YouTube, the Western RPG is just not performing. Very interesting to see that. Half Minute Hero 2, I believe this is like one of the few times this was done on the channel, so that explains why that's a little bit higher. This game's really only notable for the composers and the soundtrack. FF, A Warp List by Bowie, it's kind of one of his pet games. Final Fantasy VI Lich List actually ended up being the bidding war of the marathon, so if you go here, here, and scroll towards the bottom, the big spike of 13,000 was the text box background. Was this the year? It was the year. This is actually one of the best donations of all time. So anybody that's not familiar, if you watch this run, Alta donates $5 and just says, I don't know, actually. Okay, these are out of order. So which one? Where's the first donation? Oh, these are in order. So what he said, so the way this started is Alta donates $50, just says, hey, Puexel, what's your favorite Final Fantasy? It's a big joke. Puexel never starts talking about his favorite Final Fantasy just because it leads to a lot of stupid flame wars. Anybody that's been on Twitch for that long, and just, like, if you've streamed Final Fantasy as long and as often as Puexel has, there's nothing productive that comes of that. It's like, I'll donate $50 if you tell us. And Puexel just goes, no. So then Alta follows up. Nice try, but not good enough. How much will it take for you to tell us? At which point, Puexel says, and I quote, how much you got? At which point there is a $1,000 donation. So you want to dance, eh? I've never seen Puexel make the face he makes when this donation is read. Because he makes the saddest face and just goes, I'll open the menu next time I get a chance. Like, the sheer level of, like, desperation in realizing, oh my god, there's $1,000 going to Demon Chocobo. And I have to either stick to my principles and take that, or I have to, like, break my own personal principles. And Puexel's face just, like, straight up, like, oh my god. Like, you could just see the color go out of it. It's one of the best donation chains of all time. I believe people even ran out of the room to go give Alta a high five, since Alta was in a different room at the time. Like, it was that good. Yeah, that ended up being the big donation war in the marathon. Despite the fact that, like, Demon Chocobo was up by, like, over 1,000 for a majority of that run. But, yeah. Alta had some top-tier trolling. Going further, Radiant Historia by Ghost Wheel. I forgot that was this year as well. A little sad, actually. I feel like 18K is pretty criminally under-reviewed for that one. Something I was really surprised to see, actually. DQ3 by Cleartonic. And again, this is a game that Cleartonic has worked, you know, pretty infamously actually worked to get to this level. But, this game is, for those that don't know, this is the SM64 for Japanese speedrunners. If you're a Japanese speedrunner, you have a DQ3 time in the same way that every single Western speedrunner has a SM64 16-star time. Right? Like, so he was like one of the first Western runners to really try to, like, get into this bubble that you had to get into to do this run. But these runs never really performed all that well. Actually, I don't, but I've messed with it. I've dabbled in SM64 speedrunning. Like, I know how to do it. But and obviously it's less true now since SRL isn't a big deal anymore. But when SRL was a big deal, that was obviously a thing. But yeah, like, as far as, like, influential runners in a community goes, like, Cleartonic is basically the gateway to the West actually taking this game seriously. But I would have said at the event, this run probably underperformed my expectations. But seeing the viewership at 65K on YouTube now, this thing's had some legs. I didn't expect that. DQ does not tend to do very well here. So that's really cool. Draken Part 2, for those that don't, again, Draken needed multiple tries to actually finish. And then the last video here, Bravely Default, 44K, that actually makes sense. Kind of wish this game's route worked out a little better than it actually does, but 44K makes sense. Again, this is basically Final Fantasy that's not called Final Fantasy. So, as far as actually, like, tying in with the people that would watch the event, totally makes sense to me. If I were to go with my personal picks for, like, runs of the event that you should watch if you haven't, I would definitely say Suikoden 2 is definitely up there. I would say that trying to go from the top and make sure I don't miss anything. SD3 is definitely one you want to take a look at. This hasn't been done since, and honestly, it's still kind of amazing they ended up taking this one. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga is definitely probably worth a watch. Child of Light, 100% worth a watch. Robotrek is pretty great. PJ has a great energy for that run. I would say if you're into Final Fantasy V, this is your only chance to actually see the speedrun at an event of this size. So there's that to consider. Make sure I don't miss any. Chrono Cross, again, is definitely up there. As is, I would say, Radiant Historia would be ones I would recommend. But if you're going to only watch one run from this event, you have to watch this Crit Any Percent run. That would have actually been the world record at the time. Like, this would have been a marathon world record had Voolajin not ended up accidentally power cycling business console in the middle of this. Yeah. I mean, SGDQ 2013 doesn't count, GK. Like, this is like modern era. Like, anything post 2015 is like a completely different era for events of this size. But yeah, again, if you're gonna watch just one run, watch this one. You have incredible commentary. Like, the room is packed. It's got different energy from pretty much anything. Basically before and since. On top of that, like, Kingdom Hearts is just a really flashy game. I always call Kingdom Hearts 2, like, it's the Guilty Gear of action RPGs. Like, it's crazy, it's wild, it's high skill, but it's so crazy and wild that you can kind of appreciate it as long as you have someone able to direct your eye. And Spike and J-Hobbs do it better than pretty much anybody. So, trying to think if there's anything I'm like super missing here. If you go here, again, it's kind of interesting looking and seeing kind of how it grows. Like, by viewership, the event got 1.8 million channel views. It's a pretty big spike, all things considered. I would bet that probably that's probably double the viewership of the first event. And it didn't really get that kind of growth for like the next couple events. Like, you see, this is like less than double. It did double in 2018 and then almost double again in 2019. But the venue changed a lot for the viewership. I really think that the Final Fantasy marathon that came in August or September 2015 doesn't really get that much credit, since I really think that helped kind of catapult Limit Break to be a much bigger name, kind of almost on par with GDQs. But yeah, the Utah Guest House was probably one of the best venues. GK wanted me to mention the breakfast, but yeah, there was free breakfast every day that everyone sat down and ate. So the next one is supposedly supposed to. They're aiming for October, is the idea. But again, that's all contingent on how everything goes. So, but even then, it's going to be probably a strange one because they're using a 2020 games list for a majority of it. So it's still going to be a bit of a strange duck. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview of 2016. I don't think there's all that much that I missed, so I will go ahead and cut the VOD.